Hi, today we're going to do something completely different and out of the realm of what you usually get to see. I spend a lot of time fixing a lot of things for other people, and every once in a while I get to do something for myself. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make a modification to this. This is a Malibu brand low voltage transformer for outdoor landscape lighting. And this happens to be a model 8100-9120-01 because we need really long model numbers. This is fairly new. I think we bought this about a year or maybe a year and a half ago or so, and we use it for outdoor landscape lighting at the front of our house in Tennessee. I have a lot of experience with landscape lighting. In our previous home in California, I had no less than 6 giant low voltage landscape lighting transformers. Those are back in the days when the landscape lights themselves were all incandescent lights, and they all use a lot of power. Now everything is LEDs and you don't need as big or as many transformers, which is great. I chose this one specifically because it's electronically programmable for your on-off times and time of day and all that good stuff. It does have a light sensor that you can plug into the bottom if you want to. We don't really use that. And it has a built-in backup battery. So if you have a power outage, it maintains the settings that are programmed into it. One of the ones we had in our other house which was the last one we put in, was like this in its design. It was electronic, but it didn't have a backup battery, and every time the power went out you had to reset it, which was annoying. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take this apart while I explain. This does have a built-in backup battery, and this is all from research I've done. I have not taken this apart before, which breaks one of the rules in doing projects, but what are you going to do? Anyway, it has a built-in backup lithium coin cell battery, which from my unscientific testing will back up the settings for about 8 or 9 hours at a time. But the problem is, see how this opens up? Oh, nice. The problem is that, so here's the coin cell, this yellow thing right down here. And fortunately, we've got 2 plugs, so we can unplug the board from the big, giant, massive 120 watt transformer that's in here. So this seems to be reasonably well made. I like that. Anyway. So, plastic. Whoever wired this house that we bought in Tennessee, let's see, how can I be polite about it? He was a complete idiot. We have sort of a courtyard at the front of our house, and there are half walls, which means they're not 8-foot walls, they're only like 4-foot walls with an entryway in the middle with steps. And there are 2 post lights on either side of the entryway, and those are our basically front porch lights. There are no lights on the walls of the house themselves. And then down below on the walls on either side of the pathway, there are 2 duplex electrical outlets. Whoever wired this, well, I'll give them credit for putting outdoor electrical outlets so you could plug holiday lights in or other things, I suppose. They put the outlets on the same circuit as the post lights, so when you turn the post lights off, it turns off the outlets. And that doesn't work very well, because if you want to plug something into it, every time you turn off the post lights, you turn off the power to what's plugged into it, and then it's got to go on the backup battery. And what we found was that the backup battery will back up the settings for about 2 days. So the way you have to look at this is you turn the lights on at dusk, which is about 7:30 or so around here, and they're on. We leave them on all night because we live in a semi-rural area and we're way off the road, and it's very, very dark out at night. So you need the lights, otherwise you can't see anything at all. So we leave them on all night. They're LEDs and they don't use much power. And then in the morning, of course, when you get up, you turn them off, and then this switches over to the backup battery, and it will back up the settings and maintain them in that sort of on-off pattern over the course of about 3 days. And at that point, then it loses the settings. And that would be, I would guess, because the coin cell battery doesn't have a chance when the lights are on for roughly 8 hours. It doesn't have enough time to fully recharge. It recharges some, but then the next time you turn it off, it diminishes, and then it charges up some, and eventually you run out of charge and you lose all the settings. So what I'm going to do to improve this, oh, and one of the things behind all this is that there is no way to rewire the electrical outlets, since the wiring is built into the half walls and it comes from one side of the house this way and the other side of the house that way, because there's the pathway in the middle that's a break. There isn't any way to rewire it. It's all brick on the exterior of the house and it's all buried inside the walls, and it's just not worth it. And for the time being, this needs to be on the little half wall on one side of the pathway in the courtyard entrance of the house. It could eventually get relocated to another area, but we're not ready to do that yet. And realistically, with all the other things that go on here all the time, it will be probably a year or more till I get to that. So I just want a solution that makes it easier so I don't have to go out every 4 days and reprogram this thing, which is annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the little lithium coin cell battery with this. This is a lithium polymer rechargeable battery pack. And this little battery pack, this is 1,000 milliamp hours, and I have to look up what this is, what the coin cell is, which I'm going to do in a minute. But this one has approximately, I think it's at least 10 times the backup capability that this does, or capacity, I guess is the right word. And so I'm going to substitute this for this and make a small modification. Now, I was unsure about the amount of space I would have in this to put this. And fortunately, this is really small, and we'll find a place to put this in here really easily. I don't think that'll be a problem at all. So that's the project. I have to take this board out, and then we can get to it. So it's got little tiny screws. And where do the screws go? The screws go in the cup. I show this in other videos. When you take something apart, contain all the pieces. Oh look, there's even a dead bug in it already. It hasn't even been out there very long. Alright, do that, and then from what I saw online, take the knob off, goes in there, and then the board comes out. We'll put the housing over there. So it's just a little circuit board, not a lot to it. You got a 4 7-segment LEDs, you got some tactile switches, you got a rotary switch. This looks like a little crystal. You got some kind of little micro. Let's take a look at that real quick. The numbers are really small. It's a U2007, doesn't have a brand name. That's a little microcontroller. It's a little self-contained. It's got a chip. It's got probably firmware in it of some kind, and that's pretty much a capacitor here. Another little device over here, which looks like it's a DS1302Z. Don't know what that is. Could look them up if I cared, but I really don't. The goal here is to replace this. So I'm going to take this off the board. What we're going to do is we're going to desolder this, remove the coin cell, desolder the terminals, add some wires to it that then we can connect onto our lithium polymer battery pack and do the substitution. So let me go ahead and remove the coin cell, and then we'll get to it. All right, got to take the coin cell out. Need the visor so I can see well. Try to do this so you can watch. All I'm going to do, it's got some like heat shrink plastic over it, looks like, to protect it. So we'll take that off if we can. Plastic. And then the coin cell should just slide out. probably, or it could be held in. That's what we want. Let's see. No, see, it's actually tacked down. It's a little hard to see, but there's the tab that goes across it, which is the positive connection, and it's actually sort of spot welded in 2 spots onto the battery so it doesn't come loose. And what I'm going to do, instead of cutting that, which is what most people probably would do, I'm going to desolder it as a single piece, because I'm also going to guess that the bottom contact, which is down here, is also spot welded on, and then it goes through the holes in the board and is soldered in place. So instead of cutting it and destroying it, let's see if we can remove it more carefully than that, because you never know. So what I'm going to do is, it's a through hole connection, so I'm going to add a little solder to each side, like that, because that will make it easier to desolder. Because soldering and desoldering is all about heat, and if you have a better thermal connection, because you have new and better solder, so much the better. So we'll put this on here, let it heat up for a second. That one and this one. Try to keep your soldering iron away from the LED display so you don't melt it. And did not go through that well. So we'll try it on this side just a tad. And I think that will probably be pretty close, or not. Like that. See, once you get the bulk of the solder off, there's always, since it goes through the board, through the via in the board, you have to, there'll be just a little tiny tab of solder left sometimes, and you need to break that. You don't want to pull it off the board, force it out, because if you do that, you will rip the via. The via is a little tube that goes from one side of the board through the board to the other side, and if you rip the via out of the board, then you've broken the connection between one side and the other, and that's not good. So this one right here is open. This one's got a little blob left in it, so again, we'll just put a little dab of solder on it, heat it up with the desoldering gun, and now it's open. These kind of boards, these are just sort of consumer level, like fiberglass boards, nothing fancy, and it doesn't, not a lot of problem with desoldering on boards like this. So here's our little lithium battery with its welded on tabs, and you can see the little leg here. Oops. You can see the little leg here and here that went through the board. Now this is a LIR 2032 3.6 volt lithium ion rechargeable battery, and I'm going to go look up real quick what the capacity of this is. So this little, I did a quick Google search, this little LIR 2032 is rated at 45 milliamp hours, and this one actually, I actually found you can buy these. This is probably made by Panasonic, and it comes with the little tab leads on it, all pre-welded and ready to go. You can buy a replacement one of these for $1, I think it was $1.39, pretty cheap. This one, this little lithium polymer pack, has 22 times the capacity of that. So this is equal to 22 of these. Now, while that sounds really great, it's not this is not a forever thing. If this one lasted, let's just say it backs it up for 4 days before the lack of fully recharging diminishes the voltage to the point where it won't back up the microcontroller any longer, this one will last for 22 times as long, so roughly 88 days. Because you still would have a situation where this one may not recharge fully every single time the post lights are on, so you lose a little capacity every time you turn the power off, and eventually it will catch up with it. However, knowing that, there are times that the lights get left on like for 24 hours or more. It's like if you go away for a couple days, we leave them on because it shouldn't be dark at night and they're not on a timer or anything. Given that, it may be every now and then, like maybe every 80 days, you have to leave the lights on for 24 hours, but that's not really such a big deal. So this is a good solution. I probably could have gotten one of these that was twice as much, like a 2000 milliamp hour battery pack, but I didn't want anything that was so big that it would be hard to fit into the housing. So I think it'll be fine. What I'm going to do to give me maximum flexibility on where the battery pack actually gets placed inside the housing is I'm going to add some wires to the board and then splice them onto the wires on the lithium polymer battery pack. This has a really tiny little connector on it, and I don't have any sockets that size, and it didn't come with any, of course, so it's not really a big deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just some 22 gauge stranded wire. We're going to make both pieces the same length to begin with, because that just makes it easy and simple. I would recommend that you use stranded wire for something like this because it's more flexible. And I also would recommend that, since it's a battery pack and battery packs have polarity and also lithium battery packs, you don't want it to go poof and explode and catch on fire by hooking it up backwards. So battery packs, generally speaking, the wiring connection, as it is on this one here, red and black. So if you make the wires you add on red and black, it's kind of a no-brainer. We'll just solder that to the board. And then we'll do this one. And that's that side, and just for belt and suspenders, we'll put a little bit on each of the other side of the board. Oops. Like that. That's good. Now the next thing we should do, just to keep it neat and tidy, we need a little bit of heat shrink tubing, because it would be best if you didn't have the wires flopping around here. There are other ways you could do this. If I had wanted to, no, that's too small. If I had wanted to, I could have twisted them, as I've shown in some videos, but I didn't do that. Let's see what I can find here. Your tub of heat shrink tubing will have all kinds of little remnants. And you sort of hold on to them because you never know what you're going to need. So that's almost ready to go. Let's strip the ends off. Like that. Now the other thing we're going to do real quick, just because I want to know, is we're going to measure the voltage of our replacement battery pack to see if it should be fully charged, but it's always good to know. And it is 3.9 volts, so it probably is mostly fully charged. What we need to do is cut the little connector off. Since it's a battery pack and it's charged up and it's a lithium battery pack, you don't really want to cut both wires together at the same time. I know that might sound kind of silly, but why take the chance? All right, so we'll undo those, and now we're going to strip this back, like that, and we need, again, a little bit of heat shrink tubing. What do we got? We got blue. Blue's always good. Blue's very popular. Yep, that'll work. So you want your heat shrink tubing to be about twice the length of your solder joint, and yes, we are going to solder these. I could use like crimp connectors on them, but if you solder them, then it's forever. And of course, remember to put your heat shrink tubing onto the wire before you've soldered the other end on, otherwise you won't be able to put it on. So we'll go ahead and make our splice connection. The way I like to do this is I make it a parallel splice. I don't do a butt-end splice because then it's too thick and chunky and hard to get the heat shrink tubing to cover it up properly. You know, part of the goal when you do something like this is do it right the first time. Do a complete and thorough job. That way you don't ever have to go back again. The way I was taught is if you do a repair, and this is not really a repair technically, but kind of, it should last for like 25 years. You should not have to revisit what you did because you did a poor job on it in the first place. So that's soldered on. And now we'll get our heat gun. Let that come on. And we'll get our heat shrink tubing oriented correctly. And we'll just shrink it in place. Do that one. And we're almost done. So I've got it programmed. It's plugged into the power supply up on a shelf on the workbench, and I have it programmed. It's 10:54 on Wednesday morning. Now it's 10:55, and I set the on time for 7:30 p.m. It's got these really nice little red LED, surface mount LEDs on the board, plus the 7-segment delay. So nice and easy to see. So on time 7:30 p.m., off time 10:15 p.m., which is normal for us. And then you've got your rotary switch, which when you turn it, the LEDs change. So you have different settings for it and everything. It's only been on for about 2 minutes so far. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to turn it off and let it be off for 2 minutes, and then we're going to turn it back on. Two minutes is always a really long time when you're sitting and waiting. I can't tell you how many times on service calls for people's intercom systems you have to wait for something to reset or whatever it is, and it takes like 90 seconds or a minute or whatever it is, and it's like the longest minute in the world standing there waiting, especially if the customer is standing there watching you wait, and it seems like, God, is this ever going to get done? So we're at 1:10 and it's counting up. We're almost at our 2 minute mark. Wow, we've got to minute 20. Got 40 seconds to go. And the only proof of this is that the battery pack is actually connected correctly, and it will actually back up the settings. That's all I care about. I don't care about anything else other than that. And the other thing that's interesting, we're at minute 35, is you don't have to worry about this little battery pack like, oh, is the charging voltage right and everything? Well, it is, as near as I can tell, because this voltage on the battery pack is the same as the coin cell we took out, minute 49. And also, this has little charge circuitry built into it, so it manages its own charging. So you don't have to worry about it overcharging and exploding and things like that. It's not a Samsung phone, okay? It's not going to explode. So we're at 2 minutes and 4 seconds, 5, 6, we'll turn it back on. And it's now 10:57, and our on time is still 7:30, and our off time is still 10:15. So it does back it up correctly. Stop that. Now all we have to do is reassemble this and we'll be ready to go. So we'll turn it off and we'll unplug it just to make it easier. And we have to put the little board back into the case. So we'll unplug that for a second. Make sure the little rubber goodies are in the right place. This sits in here. Oh, one of the things I saw, this came up on a YouTube video. Actually, I thought, see, you're not the only ones that go to YouTube videos. One video I saw, when they went to take the board out, he took the screw out of the back of the switch, the rotary switch, and when he did that, apparently there's a ball and a spring that make it go click, 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 click as you turn it. You don't need to do that. You just pull the knob off the front. And that makes your life easier when you go put it all back together. All right, so now we have to put it back together. Oh, wait, where are our screws? Oh, I know where they are. They're in the little metal cup where they belong. So see, now they're not lost. I can't tell you how many people contact me. It's like, I was doing exactly what you show in one of your videos, and I lost all the springs, or I lost 2 of the screws, or it's like, how could you possibly lose all 4 springs? And it's like, well, you know, I took the thing all apart and it was on the kitchen table, and then the phone call came, and then I had to go have a bologna sandwich, and then something else happened, and I really didn't get back to it for 3 days. Okay, that's one way to go. So I think what we're going to do here, and this is probably going to be kind of hard to show, is we'll plug the 2 cables back in. And we need to find a place for the battery to live. And I think a good place for the battery to live is in this little slot right here. So I believe these are the main connections. This is the 120 coming in. One of them goes to here and then back out to the transformer, and I'm pretty sure without taking it apart, this is a big capacitor to filter the AC as it comes in. And then down here, this is there's a relay, and looks like probably a safety cap and another cap and a couple other odds and ends. I'm not taking all that apart, but this is small enough, and since we put it on wires, I think maybe, or maybe not, it looked like it was pretty close. It might just be a little bit too big. It's a little bit big to fit in there, but it might fit right in there. You don't want to squeeze it, because we all know what happens, or we should all know what happens when you squeeze lithium batteries. They get very unhappy. And then there's the smoke and the heat and the running and the screaming and all that. Reroute this wire a little bit around this way. Fortunately, they're pretty long, so not too difficult. And I think we can simply slide it back together just like that. And see, nobody will be the wiser. Put the screws back in the back. couldn't tell when I was doing my brief research about this whether the Malibu company is still in business or not. Some places I saw said it wasn't. A lot of places I saw said it was. And their products seem to be available everywhere, so I don't know what the story with that is exactly. But I'm happy with this. It was not very expensive. I don't remember exactly how much I paid for it, but I think it was around $45 or something, which is pretty good. And with all the landscape lighting being LEDs nowadays, you can run a lot of lights off this with 120 watts. So we put that back together, and we have to put our knob back on like that. It's keyed so it will align correctly. We'll plug this back in up here this way, and if we did our job correctly, it'll turn back on. There was no smoke, there was no flames, there was no running and screaming, and the time is 11:03, which is correct. And our on time 7:30, our off time 10:15, and that's it. That's all it took. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinstall this now, and I'm going to keep track of it over the next, I don't know, 80 days and see how it does. And maybe after that, I'll do a follow-up and let you know how it goes. If you need to do something like this, plan a little bit and it'll be successful.